Hey, good afternoon, guys. I'm meteorologist John Hominuk with Empire Weather. Today's Thursday, December 5th, and I wanted to address some of the latest happenings in the world of energy weather and just the general pattern across North America. We're approaching a really critical time of year, and the forecast, while it's pretty quiet and I guess you could use the word boring right now in the medium and long term, it's about to get very volatile, and I think we want to get our bearings here as we look ahead through this afternoon, not only late this week, but also into next week as well. So let's start by assessing this pattern as it is right now. As we know, we've gone through a period of high latitude blocking, which just refers to ridges of high pressure that exist up here in the higher latitudes of the Arctic. On this side of North America, it's usually in Greenland, Hudson Bay of Canada, and then Alaska and Western North America. So we're in the residual phase of that right now, where we have a ridge up here in British Columbia that extends up into Alaska, the higher elevations here, the higher latitudes up into the North Pole. And so that has driven cold air down into the central and eastern United States. If you follow these black lines, you could see that the flow of air is coming from the pole basically straight down into New England and the Great Lakes. And so that's all that cold, this Arctic disturbance has been really effective in bringing cold air down into this part of the United States. And you can see that these temperature anomalies are fairly impressive over the next couple days, well below normal in the Ohio Valley and in the eastern United States. And I want to remember this configuration because it's been effective in bringing cold down into the United States. So the alarm bell should be going off here for what this kind of configuration can do. So this is what effective cold configuration looks like, right? And now I want to look at something called the MJO, which we've looked at before, Madden-Julian Oscillation. And basically it just monitors the movement of thunderstorms and convection throughout the equatorial Pacific Ocean. And the greens are showing you an environment that's favorable for convection. It has lift in the atmosphere. The oranges, yellows, and reds are showing you an environment that's less conducive to convection or has subsidence or sinking air. And so what we really want to monitor on this chart is, are these greens and blues sliding left to right this way across the equatorial Pacific over time? So time runs here. You see this is the 6th of December and it runs all the way through mid-January. The thing that sticks out to us here is that it doesn't slide left to right. We are in a low frequency sort of standing wave pattern where the convection is generally in the same spot now as it will be 15, 20, 30 days from now. And another way to look at that is we could look at this on a flat map of just the world in general, and we could look at day 5, 15, and 20, and even beyond that, and we can see exactly where this convection is, right? So here we are right now. A lot of the convection and thunderstorm activity and lifting air is here in the Western Pacific and in the Indian Ocean. And 25 and 30 days from now, it's still in the same spot. So we're not getting much movement of the MJO through the next month or so, bare minimum. And it's important to note this because this pattern has been conducive to blocking across the hemisphere. It's been very effective in allowing cold air to come down into the United States. So why are things changing? Why is the forecast turning warmer? I want to introduce you to something called East Asian Mountain Torque. And so this is a lot of fancy words, but the way we're going to look at this in very simplistic terms is, here's a map of Asia. This is the Western Pacific Ocean, and this is the higher elevations. You can see here, this is the Urals and the Tibet Plateau and the Himalayas. So high pressure up here, building and dropping down into Eastern Asia. That's what's happening here. So you see this high pressure really builds and drops down into Eastern Asia. And as it does so, it helps to form the development of strong low pressure in the Northwest Pacific up here on the top right part of this chart. And that pressure gradient is what becomes important. So again, high pressure drops off the higher elevations, drops into Eastern Asia, and helps form a low pressure up here in the Pacific. And that pressure gradient between the high pressure and the low pressure forming kicks off the development of a very strong Pacific jet. And that's what we see the models show in the short and medium term. By mid-December, this very long, extended Pacific jet stream is going to target the United States. And as it does so, the pattern is going to trend much warmer. So here's how this looks visually across North America. Your big block goes away and gets replaced with a trough in the western United States, and that puts a ridge and mild air in the central and eastern United States. And that's all as a result of that Pacific jet. Again, your cold is going to start to fade, as you can see here visually, and pushes away with milder air taking over the United States as we move from really essentially about the 13th or 14th of December onwards into the latter half of the month. So we know that this transition to warmer is happening, and now we can understand why it's happening too, being the Pacific jet's engines are being turned on by this mountain torque event. But if we watch the extended European and we pull this same forecast out into early January, all of a sudden that big pressure gradient goes away. And so what this is signifying is that mountain torque event is ending, and the engine of that Pacific jet is going to eventually shut off. So the flag should be going up in your head now. If we turn the engine of the Pacific jet off, that will reduce the momentum in the Pacific, right? This big push of mild air will slow down. And if the MJO is still in the same spot that was just conducive to cold, it hasn't moved, right? It's a standing wave still sitting here in the Western Pacific. The pattern has a higher than normal chance of reverting back to one that encourages blocking and encourages cold. And that's exactly what we see on the European. So here's the pattern as we go into the middle part of December. You see your trough developing here out west. You get your warm pattern. But let's roll this forward and watch what happens as we move this forecast into early January. All of a sudden, your ridging comes back on the western coast of North America, pushes up into Alaska, and your troughing surges back down into Canada, colder air pushing back into not only the Great Lakes, but the Northeast as well, and that trough deepens over time. If we look at the temperature anomalies that develop, you can see this cold really expanding here across the United States as we move into the first and then second week of January. So fundamentally, we know that this weather pattern is more conducive than usual to the potential for cold shots here as we move into January. Once that Pacific jet moves away and starts to weaken, the MJO is still in a standing wave configuration. If those two things happen, we will go back to a pattern that will encourage a return of colder air and the potential for significant cold snaps in January. Now, it's very important to take a pause here because we do not know the details of this. It's hard to know at this range what this is going to look like. The ceiling on this cold is quite high if the blocking does develop like the model suggests. Here we have this large ridge poking all the way up north of Alaska, disturbing the North Pole and taking that cold air and dropping it south. But we don't know exactly what's going to happen on this side in the Atlantic or exactly the details of how the cold will come down into North America. But the one thing I will say is the ceiling on this event, this potential cold, is fairly high, but the floor is just uncertain. We just don't know exactly how this is going to transpire. The two things we want to watch the most are this ridge developing here as we move into late December and early January. We want to watch for signs of this ridge poking up into Alaska, and then we want to see what happens on the Atlantic side. Do we get some NAO help as well, pushing this vortex in and dropping cold down into the United States? Those are going to be the two things to watch. I don't expect to see this on the European ensemble, the 15-day forecast yet. It's going to be several days. We're probably looking at the middle part of next week, about a week from now, before we start to get a little bit of clarity on how this is going to go. But I do not think that this upcoming warm pattern is going to last forever. I think we will flip back to a volatile and active period as we move into January, with the potential for substantial cold shots coming down into the United States. So we have our work cut out for us. We're going to get through this next week and warmth coming up, and then our attention is going to turn to the details of this blocking and the potential return of cold in January. We have a long, long way to go with this winter, and January could be really, really volatile here from a weather perspective. So stay tuned. We'll have updates over the next couple days. If you guys have questions, I say this all the time, but please do not hesitate. Give us a call, shoot us an email. We're happy to help. Have a great rest of your Thursday, guys. We'll talk to you soon.